Great.
Hi, everybody. Tim Hughes here, CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. Really pleased to welcome back for Brent Adamson and for his first time, Karl Schmidt. And we're going to be talking about their new book, which is it's published on the 8th of September, so it's out now.
It is.
And it's called The Framemaking Sale. Most people probably know about Brent having worked at CEB and written books like The Challenger Sale. And Karl actually worked at CEB as well, but your name wasn't on the front of the book, was it, Karl? But you were behind the scenes doing the numbers.
Very far behind the scenes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, first and foremost, Karl and Brent, thank you so much for coming along today. Where can people find you?
Tim, the easiest way to find us would be to LinkedIn. So we're very active on LinkedIn under our individual accounts. And then also at theframemakingsale.com is our website, The Framemaking Sale. We also have a YouTube channel, which is also under The Framemaking Sale, where we're posting videos. So those would be the three best places.
Excellent. So tell us, The Framemaking Sale, what's it about? What's the inspiration behind it?
So first of all, thank you, Tim. It's great to see you again, man.
Yeah.
So so I tell Karl, and Karl knows this, having been through it with me now, I don't take writing a book lightly because it's really hard. And so when we write a book, we want to make sure we've got something that's really truly worthy of people's time to put out in the world. And the Framemaking Sale is in many ways picking up some of the themes that we started in our research during our time at CB and Gartner, really understanding not so much selling and marketing, but trying to understand buying and what's happening on the B2B buying side. And to kind of put it in a nutshell, B2B buying today, particularly today, is pretty broken. Customers are really, really struggling with decision complexity, information overload, objective misalignment, decision uncertainty. And so, or outcome uncertainty, I should say. And the thing, Tim, that's why all that matters is interesting is the research we've been doing over the years. We've been able to determine that the single biggest driver of what we call a high quality, low regret deal, that is a purchase where the customer buys the bigger solution with the bigger price and feels good about it at the same time. Yep. By far, the single biggest driver of a high quality, low regret deal is the degree to which customers report a high level of what we call decision confidence, that they actually feel confident in the decision that they're making. And there's two things about that I think are so interesting. And by the way, it's everything else we've studied over the years, Tim, is really interesting. Things like challenger attributes, which absolutely have a positive impact on high quality, low regret dealers. If they're here, they're like 180% increase. Decision confidence is up here is like a 900%. It's a 10x or an order of magnitude increase. It just completely outstrips anything else we've ever studied in terms of driving better commercial outcomes, driving growth for your company. What's interesting when you look at this, though, is that when particularly I find CEOs look at this, say, well, of course, if feels like a no duh moment. If customers aren't confident in the decisions they're going to make, they're going to choose not to choose, and that's why we need to make sure that they're as confident as possible in our product, and our people, and our brand, and our service, and our trusted advisor-ness, and what you find when you dig into this decision confidence metric is you find it's actually not about that at all. It's not about customers' confidence in you, the supplier. It's customers' confidence in themselves. Have we asked the right questions? Have we done enough research? Have we thoroughly looked at alternatives? Are we even aligned on the problem, let alone the supplier? And it's there that we find, when you start solving for, and this is why it was worth it, I think, to put everything on hold, quit a job, write a book, was because I think this is the big opportunity we're all walking past, which is we've spent so much of our time focused on getting our customers to know something about us. And I think the big opportunity today is to get customers to feel something about themselves. And we're walking right past that. And particularly in a world where customers indeed are so overwhelmed with things like decision complexity and information overload, et cetera. So what an interesting thing to do to sit down and really think very systematically about what would it look like? What does it feel like to actually create an entire go-to-market model, a go-to-market approach that is specifically designed to solve for customers' self-perception? And that's what the framemaking is. And the answer to that is something we call framemaking. So that's the name of the book.
Yeah. So I mean, it's interesting because I think that there's certain things that I feel that, and you must have seen this in your careers, where you say something, but that isn't actually what the person hears. So the classic example is you talk in the book about doing a customer journey mapping exercise. Mm-hmm. And what I say and what you say is customer journey mapping. what people go and do is actually go and map the selling process. And so, this goes back to the fact that what you're saying is we need to be customer centric, not and buyer centric, not sales centric. We talk too much about ourselves, which I think is something that we tend to do anyway. So tell us more about how you define it, what it looks like, what is it? Because you in the book you actually go into detail about these are the conversations that you should be having, and you do that I remember you doing that in the Challenger and actually giving people examples, which I think is really useful. Otherwise, people come away with something that they've made up themselves.
100%. In fact, Karl, let me, Karl, you can jump. Let's start with frame. I just want to add a real quick point on this journey mapping point because it's super interesting, and I'll turn it over to Karl to kind of lay out an answer to your question. But so much, I think even progressive, or especially progressive marketers over the years have said, we don't need to map our sales process. We need to map the buying process and map out the buying journey. We've actually talked to heads of sales over the years who said, it's exactly what we do. We sit down and lay out a blank sheet of paper on the desk and with our customer and say, could you just map out your buying journey? The thing that we're interested in is this question, like, what if your customers don't know their buying journey, right?
Yeah.
So whether it's the, yes, aligned to the customer's buying journey, but if the customer either doesn't know what that journey looks like or can't navigate it on their own, then there's this added opportunity to say, what if we could actually take on this proactive role of not just being not supplier centric, but customer centric, but actually being supplier agnostic and saying, all right, let's just take us and what we're trying to do is set it over here. And we're going to adopt this role of essentially coach or guide or Sherpa. And based on things we've learned from other companies and watching them struggle and hopefully succeed, we can coach you, guide you through your own decision complexity inside your own organization. And that, I think, Karl, leads to kind of frame making as a construct, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And that's where, and I should apologize up front, Tim. I'm often refer to myself as a bit of a recovering strategy consultant. So the world of frameworks has very much been the world I've lived in for many years, and maybe the most overused term in business speak today. But if we think about framing as taking something complex, right, something that otherwise would be hard to get our heads around, and find a way to make it a little bit more manageable, right, to reduce the reduce the complexity in ways that make it something we can actually get some kind of sense of what's going on there. This example of the buyer journey is just it's one of the four big challenges that we address that are undermining decision confidence for customers. But this one's particularly critical because if a customer doesn't know how to go down this path, right? If they haven't done it before or something's changed in their organization, their new role, then what hope do they really have to be able to proceed confidently with all the different potential challenges they might overcome as part of navigating the complexity of a buying group to achieve a high quality deal, right? So if we don't have that, then how's a customer, what chance do they have to succeed? And that's where what's especially urgent for this idea now, right? And this idea of the need for sellers to take on this role to help frame complexity and make it a little more manageable for their customers is this other data we've seen that right now, if a customer could, their preference is for a rep-free experience. More than 3/4 of buyers report
Yep.
that. Which, again, many sellers, when we first presented this data to heads of sales, often they say, well, they have to, they don't have a choice. But this isn't a matter of what they have to do, it's what their preference that they could, right? And so, in order to also change that dynamic and to be the one seller or sales team that a customer actually wants to talk to, if at the core of your mission is to help that customer make the decision they can, we refer to this as the frame making mindset, to help that customer make the best decision they can in as little time as possible, well, then we're earning their time. We're actually being useful, we're being helpful, and we're getting them across the challenges that today are causing so many deals to end in no decision.
But one of the things that I think that we've been doing, and I know you say this in the book, is that we've been spending probably the last 5 years in creating loads of content, because what we need to do is we need to educate the buyer. And we're in this situation where you just go through LinkedIn, and of course everybody says how great everybody says buy my product because we're great. So everything therefore has become exactly the same. So we are back to where we were again 5 years ago, because you talk about smart ass nest, don't you, in the book? about we're all trying to be thought leaders, and actually what we're doing, if everybody's a thought leader, then there's no differentiation, is there?
And we call it the smartness arms race, right? So I joke that, somewhere around 2013, every CEO in the world woke up, realizing that they were struggling to differentiate and had the same conclusion, which is, I know what we're going to do. We're going to become a thought leader, right?
Yeah.
And so and marketing got on board. And so we have a strategy for that. It's called content marketing, and technology had a strategy. And so we got tools for that. We call that marketing automation. And pretty soon we're off to the races of just producing massive quantities of high quality content and leaving customers sort of overwhelmed. The smartness arms race is sort of ended in a tie. The only one to lose is your customer. But the Tim, the thing that, so in terms of brass tacks, going back to your question of like, so what do we do about it? The way we lay out the solution to frame making. So this book it bounces back and forth, hopefully in a very helpful way, between sort of high level strategic thinking, the kind of thing we're talking about right now. And then every chapter dives deep into, all right, what do you actually do about this? Very tactically, very practically. We did our best, at least. And we're finding since the publication is like, there's even more ideas we've had. And so workshops we've developed and rolled out is like, man, I wish that was in the book, but then it would have been 300 pages long. It would be like Tolstoy. But it stands to reason, if you're going to coach someone through a decision, to coach someone through information consumption, coach someone through objective alignment, one of the first things you got to do is just understand, what are they struggling with to begin with? What are they likely to struggle with that they don't even know they're likely to struggle with? To be able to be predictive, relative to a customer, of where they're likely to run into trouble. And you actually can do that based on what you've learned from other customers like them. This is the asymmetry of experience, and the asymmetry of knowledge absolutely skews in the favor of the supplier here. And so rather than just showing up with this knowledge of your product, which is funny enough not where your asymmetry lies, because they can get that off of Chat GPT or wherever, it lies in your experience and your connection, your access to other companies like them. So there, we take frame making, we divide it into 3 E's, the letter E. So the first is establish, which is establishing your, essentially, what am I going to coach them? What am I going to frame them on in the first place? So what's my advice? What's my prompt? What's my guidance? That can either be turned into just literally a piece of advice, or it can be turned into something much more robust, like a maturity model or a diagnostic or a checklist. We kind of work through all that in the book and why you might choose one over the other. But once you establish that frame, then that's E, the first E, then you can engage customers in a conversation about that frame. In other words, how do I provide the advice to my customer in such a way that it's likely to increase their confidence, not in me, but in themselves? And there's a really interesting thing we've learned in our research, that when you show up as an expert and say, I've been doing this for 30 years, here's what you need to do, which feels logical. I got the advice, now let me provide the advice. It turns out that actually backfires. It makes customers less confident, because you're asking them, because it's kind of like showing up and saying, trust me, here's what you need to do. It's like, well, I trust you, but I don't trust me. And that's my problem. It's not you, it's me. Right. So what we found is the better way to do this by far is to approach customers with what we call the phrase that frames, which is all based on social proof. The thing that your customers want to know is not what you think, but what other customers like them think. And that's what you have access to. So in working with other customers like you, one of the things that we've been surprised to learn is, and if we don't have another 20 minutes, and I've already banged on, but we unpack this in detail. We run workshops on this. It's so interesting to really get into the language of engagement. And then the 30 is execute. So how do we then connect, once we've connected to that one stakeholder with that coaching, how do we help them connect to others and build consensus and confidence over time in a sustainable way across a buying group and across a, sometimes 18, 24-month buying cycle. And so without it, just for the sake of time, we could pick an example if you want, but
please do. My next question was to pick an example.
Yeah, Karl, you want to go ahead and talk about? It turns out that I'll mute because my dog's barking.
Yeah, so to get real concrete as to an example of frame making in the real world that, again, we share in the book. And again, this range, as Brent described, can be everything from the simple nudge, a simple suggestion from the seller, to a classic, 2x2, aka whatever strategy consultant lives and breathes, or a maturity model, whatever it might be. If we think about a very light example of that, there's a story we share. The story of Tara is how we describe it, and this is a top seller, right? Someone who's an absolute star. When her manager is on a ride along with her. They've flown in to the client back in the day when that was more common. And gotten the rental car, drove to the client site, show up at the meeting, and it's told from the perspective of the manager who sees this meeting playing out, and they're getting ready to start, when all of a sudden, someone else walks in other than the main point of contact. This is a very early stage meeting in this deal, and it's procurement, and the manager's like, holy heck, what are they doing here, right? But Tara doesn't miss a beat, and the meeting goes great. And he's just so impressed with how she's not flustered at all. She's just, flowing with it. And by the end of the meeting, it's just gone so well that the main point of contact and procurement are like, they're like best buds at this point, right? Procurement's giving guidance. They love being involved. The main point of contact is hasn't bought this type of solution before. So having procurement's guidance is, how do I actually navigate my company to make this purchase? So anyways, fast forward to the ride back to the airport, and the manager was like, "Wow, you really handled that so well. I think so many sellers would have been thrown when procurement suddenly showed up in the room." And this is where Tara admitted to her manager, "Well, they were there because I suggested to my client that working with other customers
Yeah.
like you, I found that procurement being involved early can not only avoid things that might blow up the deal late, but also can actually be helpful." And so I encouraged them to bring them. And the manager was like, "Oh, that's brilliant." Right. And in that moment, again, that's just the classic example of the seller taking advantage of the asymmetry of information we have working with so many different customers, and then bringing that help to the specific customer to make it easy. Now, this is just a simple piece of advice, a simple reframe around, where should we involve procurement? And turns out if we pull it forward, then we get to that second part of the mindset of, as quickly as possible to help them make that good decision. Because she's like, I am too tired of deals going all the way. I spend months and months on them, and then procurement blows them up at the end. If we're going to lose, I need to lose early. And that's a very light example of frame making, but that type of nudge based on what we as sellers know that could really help the customer is exactly what we're talking about.
And I love those examples that you give, because they are, as you say, we've all been in that situation where you're in a sale and then you get all the way down to the end and it's going to close this week, and then the person says, oh no, it's not going to close this week because actually we've got to get procurement involved, and it's another 3 months. And so actually getting that the people in early are those are the practical steps that you think that a sales rep could actually do to get it to actually take advantage of the frame making sale.
Well, Tim, to get there, what's interesting is, we have this, it's tongue in cheek and it's not, because it's the brutal reality we all know from sales, which is the 4 worst words you can hear in sales are "it turns out that," and we joke that, every time your customer calls you with the phrase "it turns out that," it's like a relationship conversation starts with "we need to talk." It's all downhill from there, right? But but it turns out procurement has got involved and they got some questions, or it turns out that legal, had to go to legal. And oftentimes when customers share this phrase, it turns out that they're frustrated. They wanted to buy from you. They're really frustrated, not with you or your solution or your thought leadership. And they're frustrated with their own company and their own complexity. And what's really interesting to me is, more often than not, customers are actually surprised. They didn't see this obstacle coming, but the seller isn't surprised. They go, let me guess, it's procurement. I bet I can guess their 3 questions. And again, that's that asymmetry of knowledge. So one of the things we actually advocate for in our workshop, we run in our workshops, and advocate for in the book, is something is kind of wonky because I'm weird that way. We called it "it turns out that" audit, which is literally just to sit down and identify what are the 5 to 10 things it turns out to be that stall deals inside the customer's business that they themselves didn't fully appreciate coming. And if I do the 80-20 on that, figure out the 20% of the "it turns out that" create 80% of the problems, that becomes the raw material for, like Tara, in the case of Tara, for my coaching, for my frame making. And so that's again, there's like, very structured, sort of high end ways to do this, but there's also very light ways to do this. And I think, just like getting together at your sales kickoff meeting with 2 or 3 of your colleagues and saying, let's just make a list on this whiteboard, or this napkin of like ways that deals stall, and see if we can give our customers a heads up to avoid these obstacles, is a great practical way to become more of a frame making seller.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a great example. So we're getting quite close to the end. So I need to ask you the question about, because everyone will be saying, so what about AI? So open question, what about AI?
We actually don't cover it in the book very much, for a couple reasons. But in practice, one of the things we've been encouraging, again, during these workshops that Brent's referred to, is to think about 2 different uses of AI. So many of us are focused on how AI can make my role more productive, right? To reduce the low value work. What I think many people, again, are walking right past is to really think about how our customers are using AI to learn on their own, right? Since they have this preference not to engage sales, and to try and do it on their own. Well, again, now in theory, they've got this silver bullet to help them do it on their own. But what we're seeing is, so often those customers, when they put the question in to any of the AI engines, what they get back are a lot more questions, right? A lot more sources they can look at. So in many ways, it's actually making the problem harder. But what sellers are so often not quite doing yet is putting themselves in the role of their customer and asking that customer to ChatGPT, whichever is your AI of preference, and then seeing what is that customer seeing. What might that be missing? What misinformation may that be providing? Because again, AI still is prone to hallucinations, right? So that there is this belief that AI is going to be the great solver for so many human problems, including helping customers figure out how to buy better. But the truth is, right now, it seems the opposite is what's happening. And more than ever, what the customer needs is a human to talk to, someone like them that's been through this before, that's experienced the emotions they're experiencing, and figuring out how can they overcome those challenges, their confidence to actually make the bolder decision.
Brent, anything? Any final thoughts, Brent or Karl?
Yeah, just to sum it all up real quick, Tim, Karl alluded to it before. It's this data that we ran at Gartner right before we departed, which was 75% of B2B buyers would prefer a rep-free experience, which is highly dramatic, and I've had debates about that all over the world. But the thing that's very clear from that data is it's not that. I think there's nothing in the data that says 75% of B2B buyers would prefer a human-free experience, and at the heart and soul of the frame-making sale, particularly in this time of AI, is a story of human interaction. The question we're really trying to answer is, what would it take to be the one seller your customers actually do want to talk to?
Yeah.
And we think this is absolutely the right answer for that.
Brent Adamson and Karl Schmidt, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your book, The Framemaking Sale. I'm assuming that we can get a copy in off Amazon or any good bookstores.
Yeah, absolutely. Audiobook is on the way. It's not available just yet, but ebook and hard copy are out and available and wherever you buy books.
And if we wanted to get hold of you, where could we go? LinkedIn and
theframemakingsale.com is our website, and you can find us there. Or again, Karl and I are pretty active. I'm especially active. It's much to my chagrin sometimes on LinkedIn. We'll see you there.
Excellent. Brent and Karl, thank you so much for coming on and talking about it. It's been excellent.